I see is going right across my deck here now.
Now I have started the recording.
Okay. Cool. All right, I'll do the intro and then some patron shout-outs. 4 patron shout-outs.
Ooh.
Look at us go.
We've almost made up all the ground from the Dave Matthews Band episode. And anything about Palestine.
Yeah, maybe that too.
No, I legitimately think that more people dropped the Patreon because of the April Fool's episode.
That's so incredible.
Like, quite literally, that is the angriest that multiple people have ever gotten at the show.
We've cultivated a good audience. They know what we're about.
Like, I think we had 2 people say something about Palestine negatively, and there was at least 3, I think, who made some sort of negative comment about that episode. So, all right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name's Tanner, and I'll be joined on this very special Breakerween 2024 episode by both Taylor and Kaylee. But first, some patrons to thank. So a big Beyond the Breakers thank you to Pat, Phil, Violet, and Saoirse. We really appreciate your support over there on Patreon, and we hope you like what you hear over there. So we have a lot of fun stuff to get to, so let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the gang. Taylor and Kaylee, how's it going?
Yay! Hi guys, thanks for having me back.
Of course.
Yes, thanks for reminding us that we needed to do a Halloween episode.
Yeah, I had so much fun on the last one, so I'm glad.
I was flipping through some of my books looking for some stories for this, and I found one, and I was like, oh, this would be perfect. And then the more I read it, I was like, wait, this story sounds familiar. And then I checked, and it is literally a story that I read on the last year's. So it was
good taste.
So I think we have some good selections here. I know the general idea of Kaylee's, and Taylor, I see your notes here in front of me. I think mine are the only ones that's totally a secret.
Ooh.
Yeah, looks that way.
First, as usual, what else have we been up to? What movies have you been watching? What books have you been watching? Music you've been listening to? I don't know, music you've been making, Kaylee? I don't know, you're always making good music.
Yeah, I guess, let me see. The last time I was around, I already plugged Leading Lady. We did that. My other band, Berserk Blondes, we put out an album in July, which is, it's music sort of, but it's also like weird variety comedy stuff with my friend Steve, who is a one-man band accordion player. So that's a lot of fun. That's we have that on Bandcamp. We don't have that on any of the other streaming services yet, but yeah, just a lot of gigs doing that and my own stuff. And then my main media lately is I started watching basketball last year.
Nice.
I jumped on the Timberwolves bandwagon, and then I stayed on the Lynx bandwagon, and now I'm back on the Timberwolves bandwagon. So
nice.
That's
it's
actually
working
when we're
just like it's supposed to.
Exactly. Yeah. Once we're done recording tonight, my boys are playing their basketball, so I get to watch that, which will be fun. They're playing the Mavericks.
Oh yeah, they got to deal with Luka.
I've watched some of the Bucks this year, but they're not that fun to watch, really. So they're amazing that a team with Giannis can be so lifeless, but
And Damian Lillard.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, what about you, Taylor?
I have been reading a book, Directorate S, The CIA and America's Secret Wars in Afghanistan and Pakistan by Steve Cole. It's really good. It's interesting, like enough time has passed for it to be history rather than current events for a lot of that stuff. So it's interesting getting some context for things that were going on when I was in like 7th and 8th grade that like you'd hear names and not understand any of it. It's been a pretty good read so far, and I like the way he writes too.
Is this the Steve Cole that you referred to last time?
Yeah, same guy.
Because I don't think you said his name. I know it's the same guy. I know that. I doubt there'd be 2 Steve Coles writing about the CIA's dastardly deeds in Afghanistan.
That'd be so awkward for both of them.
Yeah, it's a good book though. It's definitely worth the read. What about you?
Thank you. since you asked, I started reading a book called The Vortex, An Environmental History of the Modern World by Frank Ucutter. I actually found it because of research I was doing for an upcoming episode of the show that I found in, I think I probably found it in JSTOR, and is a really useful article. And I realized this is no article. This is a chapter out of a book. And I found that the book is this book, The Vortex. It came out last year. I kind of expected it to be a normal sized book when I ordered it, despite its name. And it's a very large book. It was much larger than I thought it would be. It's going to take a while, but I think it'll be worth it. So yeah, I've been reading that. I've been getting more into reading more environmental history, because that's like a whole genre of stuff that I haven't really read that much about. Like, what is the environment? When you think about it.
What is the environment?
Many are asking.
So that's what I've been up to. It's good sports time of the year. Football, basketball starting up, baseball ending, with a inarguably entertaining World Series. So
yeah, go Dodgers.
I'd like Shohei Ohtani to win a World Series.
If anyone deserves a World Series,
he seems like
he
needs one.
He had a rough season, didn't start out great with the whole gambling stuff, slash having money stolen out of his bank account. He needs this. He's earned this. So, speaking of earning things, we have earned ourselves some spooky stories. I actually got a early jump on this because today in class we talked about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Ooh.
Okay.
So
Were they impressed by that? Were they into that?
Which, if you've read the story, is not technically a ghost story. But yeah, it was a good way to set the mood for some more spooky stories tonight. We have a good lineup here. So, Taylor, would you like to take it away with a tale of a haunted U-boat?
Absolutely. I have an article here. You guys feel free to jump in whenever you feel like it. Not hurt my feelings if you interrupt me. This is titled The Haunted U-Boat. This article about U-Boat 65 first appeared in Look and Learn, issue number 550, published on 29 July 1972. So it looks like it's some old kind of history.
Is that like a children's magazine? It looks like something that would be like, it's like Look and Learn is very...
It sounds like a seek and find.
Speak and spell.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Seek and find, look and learn.
It kind of reminds me of those old, like the drawings are kind of like those 1950 like epic man adventure novels where like he goes to the Amazon and fights scorpions and stuff. It's a little more grounded in history, I feel like. So It seems like a legit article.
Are there scorpions in this story?
There are no scorpions, just
Darn.
some ghosts. Ugh.
Well, there's also presumably some Nazis on this U-boat, which I think are a little bit scarier than ghosts.
World War I. These were the good Germans.
Oh, okay. These are the...
This is just Habsburgs and stuff going at it.
These are the proto-Nazis. As long as...
I love a Nazi-less U-boat.
Well, some of them maybe had been to Namibia. So that's possible.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them still did awful things. All right. Before she had even left the dockyard, U-Boat 65 had claimed 5 lives. Then, a rating was lost overboard, and a torpedo explosion killed 4 men and an officer. From then on, the ghost of the officer haunted the German submarine, striking terror into the hearts of the crew. Superstitious tales, maybe, but were they?
I'm going to think yes.
All of this is copied verbatim. It's written in 1972, like British type writing. So
where it said claimed 5 lives and then torpedo explosion, were those 2 separate incidents?
Well, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll go through them as the story progresses.
Okay.
It began before they'd even finished building her. A steel girder, which was being lowered into place in her hull, suddenly slipped from its chains and crashed down on 2 workmen below.
Ugh.
What a way to go.
That sounds horrible.
Smashed by a steel girder.
I hate being girded.
Do you think the ghosts are a little smushed then?
Like, if you look at him straight on, he looks pretty normal, but like from the side, it's ugly.
They're a little wonky.
Just disappears when he turns sideways. Although he's a ghost, he could disappear probably regardless if he wanted to.
Good point.
It was unfortunate and sad that 2 men should die, the foreman said, after the 2 shattered bodies had been carried away. But the work had to go on. The fatherland needed ships. When this one was finished, it would be yet another nail in the coffin of the British imperialists who were already reeling under the hammer blows of the U-boats, haunting the icy waters of the Atlantic. Now back to work for the fatherland. With these words ringing in their ears, the workmen returned to their tasks, thinking, no doubt, that it was pressures like these which caused men to become careless. The next accident could not be put down to carelessness. Just before the ship was launched, 3 men were sent down to the engine room to check over the equipment. Suddenly, inexplicably, they found themselves choking rapidly to death in a thick haze of poisonous fumes, which seemed to come in from nowhere. Gasping their lives away, the 3 men stumbled blindly to the door, only to find it jammed. Within minutes, they were all dead. The subsequent inquiry could find no reason for the escape of the deadly fumes, nor any reason why the door should have jammed.
Do we know what the fumes were?
Like, it's diesel. It's got to be diesel fuel, right? Like, it's got to be like diesel fumes in like a shoddy built World War I U-boat. I feel like you're rolling the dice just by going down in there anyway.
Gasping their lives away. He drinks a vodka drink. He drinks a whiskey drink.
This writing is so dramatic. It feels like I'm there.
It really is. The UB-65 had already claimed 5 victims. She was to claim many more before her career came to an end.
So, with these numbers, was there a UB-40? Is that what the band is named for?
You have to look that up. There's no way, right? On a clear day in 1916, the UB-65 stood poised on the slipway, waiting to be launched. The deaths that had occurred on her were now temporarily forgotten. There were cheers as she slowly went down the slipway, carrying on board her a crew of 34 men, including 3 officers. She was a small, slim ship, but she could do a surface speed of 13 knots, and she would no doubt play her part well in the war against Britain. So intent was everyone watching her go that they were hardly aware of the dark clouds gathering out at sea. It's just too perfect, isn't it?
See, I heard that first as like metaphorical.
We're talking real clouds.
Like she was sailing into danger. But no, real actual clouds.
The UB-65 had put no more than a mile or 2 between her and the shore when a squall bore down on her, causing the sea to swamp her decks. As the waters receded, they took with them one of the ship's ratings, who disappeared beneath the waters, never to be seen again. The UB-65 had claimed her 6th victim. This is like the most dramatic writing that this guy's doing.
Okay, so at the beginning, where it said claim 5 lives, then a rating was lost overboard. Is this that guy?
Yeah. We're caught up in the story now. Like,
okay.
That was number 6.
Okay.
Already, and they've just launched her.
That's too many this early on, I would say.
Right? Like we haven't even gone to war yet.
This is doing Hunley numbers right now.
The cheerful atmosphere which had existed on board among the crew was replaced by a heavy gloom. Were they sailing on a vessel on which fate had placed the finger of doom? Certainly, these melodramatic forebodings seemed justified, for no sooner had the UB-65 begun her trials than she sprang a leak in one of her tanks, trapping the crew underwater for more than 12 hours. When she finally surfaced, the crew and officers were reeling like drunken men from the effects of the poisonous fumes that had slowly seeped through the U-boat while she had been underwater. But at least they were still alive.
It's a very high-effort way to get a buzz.
I can't think of anything more scary, though, than being stuck in like a World War I submarine on like the seafloor and like not being able to come up. Like, no thank you.
I think I've probably even said this on this podcast before, but like I am so like not down with submarines that I don't even think I would go on one if it was on land, truly. So the thought of being
it is
at
very
the bottom of the ocean
confining.
on one.
Well, like I having gone on the tour of the USS Cobia in Manitowoc, and just like being on that thing, and again like surfaced, it is still a functioning submarine. So they have stuff like cordoned off as like, do not touch this lever. Like, because I've been in there a couple of times, and I'm always paranoid. This like someone's gonna trip and fall, and then just like launch this thing out into Lake Michigan.
Hit the button that says dive.
No one on board is gonna know how to steer it, except maybe one of the really old tour guide type caretaker people who hang out there and maybe served on one. But probably not as a guy who could steer it. I don't know.
This is kind of the plot to U571. I think that is crazy though, like being stuck on the seafloor. Like, absolutely not. And I think from like reading with like the Lusitania stuff we did, I was really surprised to see that they would do that on purpose. They would find like a sandy spot and just lay down basically on the seafloor. That has to be a weird sensation to feel yourself kind of rocking back and forth on the bottom of the ocean.
Until we did that, I never really thought that they would like just sit and stop. I kind of thought they were like
Sharks.
fish, like they would die if they stopped
Oh yeah,
swimming.
like they had to keep going.
The next time, they were not to be so lucky. After completing her maiden voyage, the UB-65 returned to her base in Wilhelmshaven, where she began taking on torpedoes. Without any warning, there was a sound of a fearful explosion as a warhead exploded, killing 5 men, including the second officer. This article doesn't say it. That second officer apparently is named Lieutenant Richter.
Did you learn that on uboat.net?
I did not go on uboat.net for this episode.
I was gonna throw a little bone to the discourse dogs here. Maiden voyage. Misogynistic?
Ooh,
That's
I
a
bet
great
you can
question.
find a great angle for either opinion.
Like a needlessly gendered thing when we're talking about this vehicle, this machine. Even the concept of gendering ships as female.
Is this U-boat not a girl boss? Is that what you're trying to say?
Women had it too good for too long, right?
I need to flesh this out.
So with that explosion, the UB-65 had now claimed 11 lives. So she's hit double digits.
That's too many.
She's still like, I don't even know if she's actually sunk anything yet. So she's still trying to actively kill other people too.
It's an intimidation tactic. It's like, look at what we will do to our own guys. You don't think we won't sink your ships? Come on.
Keep your friends close.
Yes.
After the necessary repairs had been carried out on her, the UB-65 prepared to set off on her first major voyage. It was nighttime, and the captain and his officers were in the cabin, lifting their glasses in a toast to a successful voyage. Suddenly, the door burst open to reveal a white-faced rating. "I've seen him, sir," the rating said hoarsely. "The second officer, the one who died in the explosion. Peterson and we both saw him walking up the gangplank." The captain stared grimly at the rating. "You're drunk. Now get out of here. I'll see you in the morning when you've sobered up." Everyone is always so quick with the "you're drunks" back in the day.
I think their success rate with that guess would probably be a lot higher. Also, I think a bunch of German guys who spend all their time in a metal tube, I would venture to say that every rating was probably a white-faced rating.
Probably.
I would think there's a lot of whiteness in this U-boat.
But the rating refused to go. "I'm not drunk, sir, nor is Peterson. He's so frightened he's gone off and hidden himself somewhere." The captain could see now that the rating was indeed sober. He could see also that something had clearly frightened him out of his wits. He rose briskly to his feet. "We'd better find your friend, Peterson." They came across Peterson, quivering with fear, his back pressed against the conning tower. The sight of the captain reassured him, and he was able to give a coherent account of what he had seen. The ghost of the dead officer coming aboard. Patiently, the captain tried to reason with the two men, but nothing could shake them from their story. Finally, dismissing them, the captain returned to his cabin. I can find no explanation for what they saw, he told his officers. But of course, sailors are a superstitious lot. That is true, one of his officers said, but it seems strange that two men saw something. The captain frowned and said nothing. A few days later, Peterson deserted and was never seen or heard from again. At least, it was assumed that he had deserted. Was it possible some of the crew muttered amongst themselves that he had been spirited away? But not like the fun Spirited Away, like the movie.
Do they think he got raptured?
Aren't they out at sea?
He got left behind.
Where would he have gone?
They probably had to dock somewhere. I don't know.
It would have been really crazy if this happened while they were underwater.
While they were stuck on the bottom.
Yeah.
After that, there were no incidents until January 1918, when the UB-65 was plowing its way through a rough sea in the English Channel. Frozen to the marrow, a solitary man stood on the deck, keeping a lonely watch from the standard lookout point. Suddenly, he became aware that an officer was standing mute and motionless on the heaving deck below. He was about to call out a warning when the officer looked up, and he found himself staring into the face of the dead second officer.
Ooh.
You just
Gotta
cannot
hate
get
that.
rid of that guy.
Scrambling below, the lookout stammered out his tale to the captain, who promptly went up to the conning tower. An icy chill clutched at his heart as he saw the figure. Then it vanished, leaving only the gray sea swirling over the deck where it stood.
Now that is a bit of a twist, because I feel like usually the classic ghost story trope would be the guy sees it, he goes to get the captain comes back, and it's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that it's still there.
It hung out long enough to be seen by two people.
A few weeks later, while he was on shore in Bruges. Is that Bruges? That's
It
Bruges,
is.
right? Okay.
Bruges.
Sure.
It's in Belgium. That's where Daddy's from.
Someone will get that gold member reference. A few weeks later, while he was on shore in Bruges, the captain was killed during an air raid. The crew, convinced that the figure he had seen on deck had been an omen of death, all asked to be transferred to another vessel. Realizing that they could not afford to have a ship manned by a demoralized crew, the German Navy granted most of their requests. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 1 second.
Every ship in the German Navy is manned by a demoralized crew.
Yeah, what do you mean?
They would take one look at you and be like, Hans, get back in there. Go.
No one is having a good
You're
time
sad? Yeah.
in the 1918 German Navy.
A few months later, it started all over again. It's just like in Paranormal Activity. A torpedo gunner went mad and flung himself overboard. And soon afterwards, another man died by being washed overboard by a freak wave which swamped the decks of the U-boat. I will say the deck of a U-boat's probably a dangerous place to be. Like, you're going to get swept away from time to time, right? That's going to happen.
It's like a whaleback. It's like you're already
Uh-huh.
pretty much underwater.
You're practically asking for it. Let's go ahead and get ahead of it on this place name. How do we say that?
Well, do you if you could try the Dutch pronunciation? The Dutch pronunciation is like Zeebrugge.
No thanks.
It's like a voiced velar fricative. It's like a sound we don't have in English. But the French pronunciation of that is Zeebrugge, I believe.
That's what I was going to go with. So that's what we're doing.
Zeebrugge, which just sounds like a French person saying the Bruges.
Limping home after a disastrous encounter with the British Navy at sea, the U-boat put in at Zeebrugge, where, much to his relief, the petty officer was relieved of his duties due to an attack of severe rheumatism. He had a frightening tale to tell his friends. To begin with, he had always been convinced that the ship had been haunted, and this had been confirmed when he had seen the figure of an unknown officer entering the forward torpedo room. He had seen this happen several times, and on each occasion the unknown officer had not reappeared. When he had described the officer to the crew, they all told him that this description tallied with that of the dead second officer. Several members of the crew had also claimed to have seen the ghost. Even the captain had been heard to say that he was now convinced the ship was haunted by devils. Repaired and refitted, the UB-65 sailed from Zeebrugge to keep her rendezvous with doom. On the 10th of July, she was sighted by an American submarine off the west coast of Ireland. The American captain gave orders for her to be attacked. But before the torpedoes could be launched, the UB-65 blew up, killing every member of her crew. Was the UB-65 just an unlucky ship manned by an over-imaginative crew? Or was she inhabited by some evil force? Really the only two options. We shall never know. Some mysteries of the sea lend themselves to an explanation of some sorts. But not this one.
but not this one.
The end.
You know, I bet it's a really crazy feeling to like be ready to launch a torpedo at something, but before you launch it, it just explodes itself. You're like, all right,
Cool.
sweet.
I did that. That was me.
That was me.
That's what the crew of the Kursk said too.
I feel like the far more likely explanation would be like
That a Kursk-like thing happened.
a torpedo exploded inside her.
I have about as much faith in World War I torpedoes as I do World War I submarines.
Yeah.
Match made in heaven.
Oh, you have the word rendezvous in here, and that's just one of those. That's one of those words. Did you ever, like, when you were younger, have a word that you had heard before and you knew what it meant, but you had never seen it on paper? And I remember I was reading a Star Wars, one of those young Jedi ones with Jason and Jaina Solo, pre any of the new Star Wars movies. But anyway, they used that term in the book on paper. I kept saying it in my head, Rendezvous. And then like that word came up at some point later, and like it clicked in my head that, oh, this is the same word. This is the word rendezvous. That's a word I've heard before. I just had no idea how it looked on paper.
I had somehow never heard the word posthumously said out loud before. So literally a week. No, this was like a week ago. And I said posthumously to my friend, and he went, "What?"
Some people do pronounce it posthumously, so that's not that far. That's not that bad.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'm not in the complete wrong, but it was a freaky moment for me.
There's a king of France, a technical king of France. The French have the best epithets for their kings, and his name was John the Posthumous because he was a baby. I think he only lived for like 3 days, but in those 3 days, he was technically the king of France.
That rocks.
But anyway.
That was such a spooky tale.
Yeah, so
it was pretty spooky.
I mean, Germans and submarines, right? Like, what else? What else do you want?
Submarines are pretty spooky, pretty eerie things to begin with. But yeah, add a ghost in there, and plus, yeah, like you're stuck on the submarine. You can't get away from the ghost in the submarine. There's nowhere to run.
It's kind of like Predator or Alien, I guess. More like Alien.
Oh, boat leaving. Is that picking up on my mic?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
That was awesome.
I'll wait for it because the bridge will go next. And of course, they're doing a master.
Just imagining just Kaylee being like, oh, yeah, that's the Munson. Yeah.
I can do that with some horns. I'm trying to think of who's in port. I was on the vessel schedule today. Oh, actually, you know what? That literally is the Munson coming in.
Is it?
Yeah, that's literally the Munson. I'm really proud of myself, and I don't think anyone's noticed yet, but on Harbor Lookout right now for all the boats that are coming in on Halloween, I physically put into the cargo box, like we put like 4 iron ore pellets or with limestone, but I've been putting with spooky iron ore pellets with haunted limestone. I feel very good about that.
Goblin toes.
Yeah. Witch's eyeballs.
All right, Kaylee, I believe you have a spooky / eerie story for us. Or I guess you could call it a superior story rather than an eerie one.
Yes. And this is actually it's true crime kind of. So strap into you should have like a Beyond the Breakers fan name, like a Breakerinos or something. Like the true crime podcast.
I think you mean a boo crime story.
Ooh. Touche, sir. Touche.
I think you mean boucher.
And then my connection just cuts out.
Right.
All right, so the setting, as with me, generally Duluth, Minnesota. Crazy, right? August 29th, 1978. Sally Terrellson is a 44-year-old housewife. We are not sure why she went out on this particular evening, but the best guess from the police reports and the reporting that I read was that she was going out to buy a bottle of liquor from a guy she knew whose name was Virgil LaPonta, who was a 63-year-old longshoreman. Why she's buying liquor from this guy and not like the store.
I've lived in Wisconsin and Minnesota long enough though to like be like, yeah, it's plausible. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, hey man, I need something. That's why they think she went out. She's driving the 1978 Oldsmobile Tornado, which is registered to her husband Jerry. So that's what she's cruising around in this spooky August night. Sally and Virgil are last seen together at the Seaway Hotel in the West End. It was torn down just a few years ago, right around 2 a.m. So yeah, these two and their car, they are last seen around 2 a.m. They disappear, car and all, considered a missing persons case. So, happens. You go out, you disappear.
Go out trying to get your liquor fix from a longshoreman,
Yeah, that's a very, very Duluth, very Duluth thing that happened.
If it was that easy when I was going to UW Superior.
So, like I said, missing persons case, but they don't have any leads. Like, there's truly no trace of them. 5 years pass. Exactly 5 years pass. August 29th, 1983.
Spooky. The
Philip R. Clark is arriving in Duluth, Minnesota. Now, the Clark, for you freighter heads out there, built in 1952, American shipbuilding. It's a sister ship to the Arthur M. Anderson. So it's one of the steamers that's still in operation on the lake, 767 feet long, as she sails now. So the Clark's arriving in Duluth. Right as she's entering the harbor, the winds start gusting just like crazy. They hit apparently like 52 miles an hour gusting, so trying to make that turn in the harbor, that's not good. So they have to drop their anchor really quick to maintain control. I've never seen that specific thing happen, but especially before ships had like bow thrusters and stuff, this does not shock me that they would have had to do this.
Absolutely.
So it takes like 45 minutes for the wind to die down back to what they consider to be an acceptable speed. They pull the anchor back up. When they pull the 6-ton anchor back up, the crew immediately notices something that is not supposed to be there, which is hooked onto the anchor is a mangled car that was on the bottom of the bay.
Oh no, we caught a car.
Hey, Captain, does the anchor seem about one car heavier than normal?
I don't think that's supposed to be there.
The captain's like, just put that back. We don't need this. This is
If they would have just lowered it back down.
We didn't see it.
Don't need to be worried about that at all.
Put it back. Put it back.
There is a picture of it online, which is pretty crazy. It looks exactly as you would imagine. It's like they went fishing and they caught a car. So the police take the car off the anchor over to the Sea Rice coal dock in West Duluth to look it over, see if they could figure out how long it had been in the water, if it was registered to anybody, if they should be concerned about this at all. Because, like, who knows? Maybe at this point, it's just garbage. You don't know.
When we eventually get to NCIS Duluth, like, this will be a story that they use.
Yes. Here's a quote, and I can only imagine that this was a very gruff-sounding sailor man. "I've been with U.S. Steel for 36 years, and I've never seen anything like this before," said James Thorell, wheelsman on the Clark. "The only reason that anchor went down was because the weather deteriorated for a very short time. It's just a fluke that we dropped that thing and found this car. That was strictly an act of God." So that's a voice from on board there.
You've never seen anything like dropping the anchor on your bulk freighter and pulling up a mangled car with bodies in it? That's never happened to you before?
It would be way more concerning if he was like, "Yeah, this happens all the time, man."
Okay. Every time we come into Duluth, man.
Yeah, there's so many cars. So I think they weren't immediately super concerned. They were more just like, oh, that looks crazy, until they began to investigate the inside of the car and they found 2 corpses inside. Oh no.
Oh no.
So they weren't immediately identifiable because they'd been in the lake for like 5 years, but like they were well enough preserved that they could see that they hadn't been like shot or like really like scratched up, car accident, mangled or anything. They were just in there, so they couldn't tell if they had like drowned, if they something else happened.
Looks like on this day, Superior is giving up her dead.
Exactly. Yes. So they can't identify them right away, but they do have a pretty good idea as to who they might be because they realize that it is a 1978 Oldsmobile Tornado that was registered to Jerry Terrellson.
There's probably some Duluth detective, like it was almost his last day. This is cold files, been like, sitting on his desk forever. Finally gets the call.
So this is where it gets kind of sketchy. I mean, it's been sketchy, but this is where it gets like, huh. The police interviewed her Sally's husband, Jerry, and then a drinking buddy of his. Apparently, in the police file, though, there's like not things weren't taken care of very well because there's a letter in the police file that just says the 2 main suspects in this case are Mr. Terrellson and his drinking buddy Robert Broden, but the letter doesn't have any date and it's not signed by anybody, which feels like, yeah, no provenance. It's just in there. Everybody is suspecting the husband, obviously. He's kind of trying to pull the, like, oh, she must have been drunk, whatever card. But apparently, Sally was she was like a scaredy cat kind of lady. She had like a bunch of kids. She had grandkids. So it's weird that she would have been driving around the port terminal area late at night with a longshoreman. And also, some friends of hers said that she reportedly hated this guy's guts. She did not like Virgil. Why were they hanging out? Why didn't she buy the liquor and go home? Mystery there. And then the absolute cherry on top is an 8-pound rock was found inside the car. So the conclusion that was kind of drawn there was maybe it was put in there to hold down the accelerator, but really there's no way to know. The car wasn't in park or anything. It was in second gear when it was found. Who knows? And the case did go cold. He didn't have like he had like $1,000 regular insurance policy like on his wife, nothing nuts. And he died 5 years after the husband did. And then a whole bunch of the interviews and records in the case were completely destroyed in the 2012 Duluth flood. So, yeah, this one might remain technically a cold case because there's not much evidence left.
That's a really creepy story.
So we may never know why.
That is a creepy story.
I have a friend who works on this boat. I haven't asked him if there's anything weird that happens, but I maybe should. This was my coworker Scott, friend of the pod. He's the one that gave me the idea for this article.
Oh, cool.
I was racking my brain for like what I could do for something spooky, and he was like, "How about the time there were bodies in that car?"
The story is definitely gives me the same energy as the Spooky Lake Month on TikTok. I love that girl. She does a great job. It definitely like feels like one of the stories she would share on there about this random car being fished out of Lake Superior.
Yeah, that's really off-putting, that whole story.
Very much so.
It's very weird.
How many more cars are out there?
How many more anchors can... They should just drag them around and see what else they can find.
All right. Well, I guess it's my turn.
We've had dead Germans and Duluth, Minnesota. What you got for us?
This is a chapter out of Ghost Ships, True Stories of Nautical Nightmares, Hauntings, and Disasters by Richard Weiner.
The Nautical Nightmares.
Ooh.
Ooh.
So this is chapter 9. It's called Floating Caskets.
That sounds like a metal band.
I would absolutely see that band.
Last year, Breakerween 2023, I read Ghosts at Sea from this about the oil tanker Watertown, where there was the ghosts swimming next to the ship with the ridiculous like pictures of the faces.
Oh yeah.
That was the one I was reading. I was like, oh shit, this would be great for Breakerween. And like the more I was reading it, I was like, I know this story already. And then I looked back and yes, it's because I read it last year. So this is called Floating Caskets. The Sky Plover's bow barely made a wake as it sliced through the calm waters of the Gulf Stream. The schooner, heaving on the easy swells rolling in from the east, had been ghosting along. Oh,
But surely it's coasting.
probably. I've never seen that used for ships before, but it's ghosting along.
You
They
can't
knew it
do that
was
when you're writing like a
Breakerween.
paranormal book.
It's ghosting along. That's really if that was intentional, that's really like a lame it's like that episode where you did with the U-boats where there's like when this vessel got zapped and it was because the U-boat commander's name was
Zop.
Zop. It's like, God, ghosting along at less than 2 knots for several days. With the exception of the usual summertime thunderheads far astern towards the Bahamas, the sky was cloudless. So, except for some clouds, the sky was cloudless. Ahead, just on the horizon, lay a dark green streak that was the Miami shoreline. Its regularity was broken only by the Cape Florida lighthouse, pointing skyward. Okay, that's normal.
I'm obsessed with this writing so far. I'm hanging
like-
on your every word.
This feels like when Robert Evans reads the Ben Shapiro books.
Combat General Brett Hawthorne, pointing skyward, and the break that was Biscayne Channel. The gentle southeasterly breeze was giving the schooner only enough way to maintain steerage. It was a lazy day. For those not in a hurry, it could have been called a perfect day. But that afternoon in 1906 was not perfect for the men looking down at the water from the deck of the Sky Plover. The crew had just finished their noon meal when the lookout bellowed from the masthead, "Wreckage! 2 points off the port bow!" The captain looked up at the man aloft and then in the direction to which he was pointing. The helmsman was ordered to put the wheel over and head the ship on that bearing. 10 minutes later, the crew, who only a little while earlier had anticipated a possible salvage recovery, looked forlornly down into the water. Some of their faces expressed awe, others, terror.
What did they see?
"Treasure chests!" shouted the
Oh.
cabin boy. Kind of went SpongeBob there a little bit.
I like that you gave the cabin boy a high voice, though. That was good.
There's so many characters in this.
"Coffins!" a chorus of other voices gasped in unison.
Wait a minute.
Still kind of a treasure chest, potentially.
Yeah, in a way.
And coffins they were. The crew of the Sky Plover counted at least 4 barnacle-encrusted caskets tossing gently about in the nearly smooth sea. No attempt was made to recover any of the floating coffins.
You're like, all right, I'm ignoring those.
End of story. It's just...
They did the thing. Like, if you just put the car back, they're like, no, we don't want to be involved with this.
You think when that cabin boy was like, treasure chest, they look at him like, no.
No.
What are you talking about?
What?
Go back to the captain's room.
Let's see here. Word that the Sky Plover had discovered drifting caskets reached Miami well ahead of the vessel.
Cow.
I was wondering the same thing, but for the crew of Captain Bravo's pilot boat learned of the incident when the harbor pilot boarded the schooner. Is like the first thing they said to him.
We found coffins.
Hello, I'm Captain Bravo. There's caskets in the water.
Captain Bravo. After the Sky Plover's cargo, a disassembled sawmill, was unloaded, the stevedores
Like the
began.
whole mill?
You can't just keep reading that.
I
Like the
guess
whole thing.
it's like what we talked
Like
about
the
with
big
City.
wheel and everything.
It's like what they talked about with City of Everett, how it just had like a self-contained like city on there, and you just spits it out and you put it together. It's like
We're
IKEA.
loving it.
We used to be a proper country.
The stevedores began loading her outgoing cargo of sisal. What is that?
Sure. Probably an agricultural product.
Something that comes along with the shipping of sawmills, you know.
Sisal, it's pronounced.
Sisal.
It's an agave plant.
Oh,
You can
Okay.
ferment it and distill it to make mezcal,
fair enough.
the drink.
Interesting.
Okay.
I get a
Alright.
strange feeling that this is going to be a trivia question for me in like the next month, and I'm going to know
Right.
it only because of this.
All right. Loading her outgoing cargo of sisal and fresh pineapples.
Mm,
Okay.
Okay.
Sky Plover appears to be in the lifestyle.
yeah.
The longshoremen, most of whom were sailors on the beach, predicted that sighting the caskets was a bad omen for the schooner.
What? Really?
That's probably not a good omen.
Caskets floating around you in the sea? No, it's probably not good. Speculation about the origin of the coffins was heard along the Miami waterfront for months afterwards. All right, now we're going to rewind a bit in the story.
It's like a Quentin Tarantino. We have to go back.
Well, we started in what, 1906?
There's less feet in this though than a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Wait, we don't know what's in the caskets.
That's true.
Nothing but feet. It's all feet. In 1841, a son, Charles Francis, was born to the John Coughlins, Irish immigrants living on Prince Edward Island off Canada's eastern coast.
Okay, so we're changing the whole setting and everything.
That's going to come together. Charles Francis possessed a remarkable dramatic talent. In fact, his play acting ability was so exceptional that when he was 14, friends and relatives gathered together enough money to send him to England to study for a theatrical career.
Good for him.
Mm-hmm.
That also sounds like something you would do with someone who you found incredibly annoying.
Absolutely. Ship away your
Can we
problem.
crowdfund to ship this kid to a different country?
When the day came for Charles Francis to sail off, he stood at the end of the pier, looked around at the pine-covered countryside, then turned to his benefactors and said, "If I achieve fame and glory in the theater, I shall one day return to this place of my birth. No matter what odds I might encounter, God will bring me home." By the time Charles Francis Coughlin reached his 19th birthday, he was appearing on the stage in London. Before he was 25, he had become a renowned Shakespearean actor. At 30, he was considered the greatest Shakespearean actor in the English theater. His fame spread across the Atlantic, and he was invited to perform in New York City. He loved America, and America loved him.
This feels like one of Laszlo's backstories in What We Do in the Shadows.
Coughlin played lead roles opposite such theatrical greats as Miss Lily Langtry and Mrs. Harrison Fisk.
Harrison Fisk.
Oh, I'm big fans of both of them.
You're a big Fisk head?
Big Fisk head, yeah.
Eventually, he organized his own troupe, one that specialized in Shakespearean drama. Your theater troupe does Shakespeare. Okay.
More important now than ever before.
From Broadway to the roughest cow towns, he received standing ovations.
I didn't know they liked Shakespeare in the roughest cow towns.
Surely not the roughest cow towns. There's no way they have a theater capable of putting on a show like that.
It's just what they call Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's talking about Newark. Like most actors and actresses of the 19th century, however, Charles Francis Coughlin was superstitious.
Oh.
He regularly consulted astrologers, fortune tellers, and seers. One, whom he visited periodically, gave him a rather bizarre prediction. "You will never live to see the 20th century. You will be interred in a city in the south, but a great storm will beset that city, and your remains will be cast upon the sea."
I don't think I'd go back to that psychic.
Mm-mm.
Can you think of any cities in the south that get wiped out by a storm?
A lot of them.
Galveston, New Orleans, Miami.
Probably Florida.
With a show must go on spirit, however, Coughlin did not let the prophecy bother him, and he continued appearing on the stage throughout the United States.
Good for him.
On November 27th, 1899...
Oh, he's almost made it.
It's almost there.
I would just be sitting in a room, like, with nothing around me. Like, I'm making it.
But what if your theater troupe has a show?
We're getting into, like, Final Destination territory here.
We can't put on the show today. Our lead guy is trying to see the 20th century come in.
Yeah, a psychic told him he was going to die. It's a whole thing.
On November 27th, 1899, Charles Coughlin's theatrical company was presenting a performance of Hamlet in Galveston, Texas.
Oh, that's not where you want to be.
That evening, shortly before curtain call, Coughlin complained of feeling ill. After being assured that his understudy could carry on, he was taken to his hotel room. Whether Charles Francis Coughlin gave any thought that evening to the prediction made by his spiritual consultant a decade earlier is not known. But shortly after midnight, probably like the only thing he's thinking about.
It's like, oh God, she was right, wasn't she?
But shortly after midnight, he died. He was buried in a copper-lined cypress coffin.
That sounds nice, I guess.
It does sound nice. Yeah. And then they hucked it into the ocean.
That's the old Galveston funeral.
Well, the psychic said...
On August 27th, 1900, far out in the Atlantic Ocean, halfway between Africa and the West Indies, a tropical storm was born. It's like that meme where it's like Charles Coughlin, 1841 to 1899, Atlantic hurricane is like, welcome back, Charles Francis Coughlin. By the time it reached the Caribbean, it had become a full-grown hurricane.
Yay.
As the storm moved into the Gulf of Mexico, the wind gusts were nearing 200 miles per hour.
It's a lot.
The barometer at Galveston fell to 27.64 inches.
That sounds low, I think.
That sounds low.
I don't know anything about barometers. Also, it makes it sound like they have one barometer.
They all gather around the town square to see the
It's
barometer.
possible, I guess, in 1900. When the Great Hurricane struck on September 8th, it was accompanied by a storm tide that exceeded 20 feet in height. Damage amounted to more than $30 million. Nearly 5,000 buildings were demolished by wind and water.
Ooh.
Over 6,000 lives, almost 1/6 of the city's population, perished. Never before or since has such a destructive hurricane struck a major American city. What year is this from?
Probably before, what, 2003 or 4?
It is from July 2000.
Yeah, well,
All
when
right.
this looks
And we're never going to see a worse one.
Oh, no.
Also, don't worry about the World Trade Centers. Thanks.
When the 20-foot tide began to ebb, it carried with it not only the debris of buildings, trees, vehicles, and personal effects, but also the bodies of those who had perished in the storm and the Disentombed, another good metal band name. Probably already is one. For complete graveyards were swept out to sea, including the cemetery where Charles Francis Coughlin's body had been interred. Caskets that weren't shattered or sunk by the raging waters eventually ended up on the beaches or mangrove swamps bordering the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean.
Can you imagine just finding some coffins in the mangrove swamp?
That would be terrifying. What's next? A floating coffin?
Mm-hmm. Many sank. Most were never found. Others drifted for years over the seas. It is very possible that the fleet of coffins sighted by the crew of the Sky Plover in 1906 began their voyage in Galveston during the Great Hurricane. The schooner's captain mentioned in his log that there was at least several years of marine growth on the caskets. Why those coffins didn't drift apart in separate directions after 6 years is one of the many unexplained mysteries of the sea.
He made friends.
I think if we go on the assumption, okay, like accepting as fact that these coffins will stay together and they will keep their structural integrity, I guess I wouldn't be surprised that they would float together if they came from the same spot.
Yeah, maybe maybe there was some growth that would have kept them sort of webbed together too or something.
That's not the part that surprises me, that they would be together. It's that they would still be floating.
Testament to how well made those coffins were.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, this is great carpentry. I mean, we so rarely get a chance to praise carpentry in these.
They don't build them like this.
We don't. We don't make coffins like that anymore. I don't think those were good American coffins.
Good American coffin job.
Coffin job.
I think I have one of those.
Yeah.
In October 1908, the same year that the Sky Plover vanished without a trace in an area that decades later would be called Devil's Triangle, the first of the winter gales subsided that had swept.
Sorry, did we know that?
No, kind of like just glosses over that.
Well, after the ship disappeared.
Oh, but anyway.
Yeah.
The first of the winter gales subsided that had swept the North Atlantic coast. The first of the winter gales that had swept the North Atlantic coast subsided.
Mm-hmm.
Fishing vessels that had been forced to remain in port for over a week began putting out to sea. Throughout the Gulf of St. Lawrence, they were busily setting their nets, trying to make up for the time lost the previous week.
Oh no.
One group of boats working off of Prince Edward Island came upon a waterlogged oblong box.
A 1978 Oldsmobile torpedo.
Completely encrusted in barnacles, it was barely visible because of the waves washing over it. Having no idea what it was, but realizing that it must have some significance, the fishermen secured it to the stern of one of their boats and finished placing their nets. After the nets were set...
Towing
This seems
Dracula
important.
home is what they're doing.
This is how you get Dracula. Do you want
Yeah.
Dracula? After the nets were set, they towed their prize ashore. Prize is in scare quotes here.
Good.
After they scraped away most of the marine growth, they realized that it was a coffin containing human remains.
At least they picked up the coffins.
Yeah.
Or coffin.
Cleaning off the remaining barnacles, they discovered a silver plate secured to the casket. The engraving on the plaque read, Charles Francis Coughlin, born 1841, Prince Edward Island, Canada. Ooh. Died 1899, Galveston, Texas. And that's it.
I don't think they usually put that on the coffins.
Is that normal? Like, why would it be on the
I feel
coffin?
like that's the function the tombstone plays, really.
Also, like, it doesn't say that they opened it, or like, if
I
there
don't
was
think
any,
I would have.
if there was anything like,
I don't think you
recognizable,
opened that.
I
don't think
would.
you're supposed to
That'd
open
just
that.
be bones at that point, right?
I would open the ocean coffin.
Mm-hmm.
I would do that.
Maybe some kind of putrid juice.
It found me for a reason.
This is my coffin.
Also, I will say, just a very, very quick look at the Wikipedia for Charles Coughlin sort of debunks our whole story that we just read. Coughlin's coffin is a hard phrase to say. Coughlin's coffin and remains were eventually found in January 1907 by a group of hunters who discovered it partially submerged in a marsh some 9 miles from Galveston along the east coast of mainland Texas. And there is like a citation and everything for people finding his body at the time. What do we say? 9 miles? 7 miles?
9.
After you die and you're in your coffin, traveling 9 miles is nothing to sneeze at, I would say. Like, that's pretty impressive.
That's
Probably
farther
about
than
9
most
more
people
miles than
travel.
people usually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
in the coffin.
I think this is one of those stories where there's no reason to, exaggerate it, blow it up. He doesn't have to make it to Prince Edward Island. I think 9 miles is pretty impressive. After you are dead and in your coffin, yeah, that's pretty good.
Absolutely.
That still shows pretty solid coffin handiwork.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what story it was, but it was the one where the family, like the husband or like the dad and the son, survived by floating on the coffin of the already dead wife. And it was like, I guess I never really thought that coffins would be made to be so buoyant, but I guess they are.
Apparently. Coffin boat.
Coffin boat.
That took up more time than I thought. So I'll save my next story for next year when we come back.
That you already got to jump on
ships.
Breakerween 25.
Yeah.
Oh, crap. You're so much more prepared than we are.
Yeah, right? I'm going to have to spend so much more time on uboat.net to find better stories.
That was a good set of stories. I enjoyed all of those. A little bit of everything that we like Lake Superior, U-boats, and
Flowery prose.
yeah, exactly. A lot of that. Thank you all for listening to another Halloween episode of the show. I don't think we've done one every season, but I think this is like the third one we've done. So
I think so.
They're always fun. It's a good time here. And thank you, Kaylee, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I hope you put some spooky Halloween sounds behind the intro or something, so people know it's a Halloween episode.
I will
from the
do
team.
that. I will do that.
Thank you for the authentic Duluth background sounds in this episode.
Yeah, that
That's
really
awesome.
couldn't have been better. I totally forgot that was going to be coming in. So.
I feel like for most podcasts, it would be like, oh, that noise is annoying. For ours, it's like, no, more of that's fine.
I could totally snip that and add some like effects on it and use it in our if we do more of the what were the series called? Dead Reckoning, the stories.
Yeah.
Put that in the background. Sounds
Absolutely.
spooky.
That'd be cool.
So thank you all for listening to yet another episode of the podcast. With that being said, actually, before we go, Kaylee, anything else? Where can people find you? Where can people find your music?
I got a Bandcamp, both for the Berserk Blondes and one for myself. That's just under Kaylee Matuszak. And then there's links to most of that on my Twitter at Kaylee Fabulous. Usually Duluth's famous Kaylee, but this month I'm Booluth's famous Kaylee. Yeah, that's me.
I guess we never actually tell people where we can be found. We are on Twitter at beyond_breakers. I am on Twitter at HiveFleetHodag. And Taylor, you just used the Breakers account, right?
Yeah, I don't think my old Twitter still works. I think Elon took it away from me.
It is a kind of a fun, I guess, bit of in knowledge is that Beyond the Breakers, we both tweet from that, but if a tweet is using first person singular with I, it's Taylor. If a tweet is using we, it's probably me. So that's a good way to tell the two apart.
I like when you're both posting at similar times with very different tones.
Very different content. I was going to say it's also sort of manic in its content at times.
Love.
So with that, we will sign off here. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you again soon.